All right, good afternoon, everybody. I have 12:01. Let's go ahead and get started today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're having a good day. I think we've got a real good presentation for you today. As always, you know, the Wednesday webinars, we do them every month. If you've got any suggestions, feel free to send me any suggestions for topics or speakers, and I'll see what I can do to get those on the schedule. I am starting to build the schedule for 2025. I do have one in place for January, and I will get that out soon. Today, we are going to talk about Field PIOs ready for the call. We're going to learn how to deploy, how to integrate, and how to demobilize for an on-scene incident. It's going to be a real good one today. Our featured speaker was deployed to serve as the incident PIO in support of a small rural community in southern Utah, faced with an imminent dam failure, anticipated flooding, and pending evacuation orders. He didn't know any of the people he would be working with, but quickly assimilated into the organization and provided successful media and public communications throughout the climax and resolution of the incident. I've seen this presentation earlier, and he's got some really good videos he's going to show you. So today he's going to share his experiences, his lessons learned, and other takeaways to help PIOs who may face similar deployments at a moment's notice. Getting tongue-tied there. So today's speaker is going to be Wade Mathews. Wade served as PIO and Be Ready Utah Outreach Manager for the Utah Division of Emergency Management for over 10 years. From 2000 to 2013, Wade was the PIO for Toole County Emergency Management in Utah, where he had the privilege of participating in the Chemical Stockpile Emergency Preparedness Program, which is presenting this Wednesday webinar for you today, and being a charter member of the CSEPP Public Affairs Integrated Process Team. Over the years, Wade traveled to all 8 CSEPP sites to evaluate exercises and participate in meetings and conferences. Wade has been a University of Chicago Argonne Associate since 2009, assisting with the delivery of Joint Information and Joint Information Center and spokesperson training courses across the country. Prior to becoming a PIO, Wade was a TV news producer for KSTU Fox 13 News in Salt Lake City, producing coverage of historic events such as Colorado's Columbine High School shooting and the Salt Lake City tornado. Wade lives in Toole, Utah with his wife, Kristen. He enjoys collecting and displaying World War I and later military artifacts in the Toole Valley Museum. So if everybody would help me welcome Wade. Wade, I am going to turn over the screen to you. You may share at any time. I want to tell everybody that I will be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, or if you don't want to ask it, if you type it into chat, I will make sure that Wade gets it. Wade, it is all yours. Thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you very much, David. I appreciate that and that nice introduction. And I recognize a few names here. So hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. And just one thing, it's Tooele, and that's a different spelling of a strange name. Tooele, Utah, I think is an Indian name. I had the opportunity, and I've just recently changed jobs. I was PIO for Utah Division of Emergency Management. I'm now the Public Affairs Officer for Tooele Army Depot, who's giving me the time to do this presentation for you today. So yeah, let's get right into it. David explained what we're talking about here, so I'm going to start this off with a little overview video.
Breaking news from KSL.
Good evening. We begin with breaking news tonight. A small southern Utah town has been told to prepare to evacuate. This after a break in a dam that flows into Panguitch from Panguitch Lake.
Yeah, news specialist Debbie Worthen following this closely for us tonight. Debbie, really, how serious of a situation are we talking about here?
Well, Mike and Deanie, it escalated this evening. Now, yesterday they noticed that there was a crack in the top portion of the dam, that 2 feet at the top. That's an add-on, but tonight there is concern that the main dam could break. Now, if that happens, we're told half of Panguitch Lake could end up in the town of Panguitch. Well, we all know how big a gallon is. This is a gallon jug. Well, how much water is in Panguitch Lake? Well, half of it, that would be 4 billion gallons of water. That water flowing through the dam, seen from Chopper 5, is not good.
When they come up, we've noticed that there's some transverse cracking across the dam.
That was Monday night. Sergeant Tom Talbot spent Tuesday on lookout. It's still cold up here. The lake sits at 8,200 feet. Right now, the top of it is still a solid 2 feet of ice. Officials believe that ice and strong winds are what caused the first break in the top of the dam. The dam was built in the late 1800s. It stands 24 feet high. The top of the dam, that's an add-on, and that's where the initial problem appeared.
There's an upper portion of the dam that has sustained some damage from the ice.
As of Tuesday night, the main dam could be compromised too. Highway 143 is closed at Panguitch up to the lake. County officials are now telling the town they're in a level 2 emergency situation, which means prepare for possible evacuation. They say residents should stay informed, have an evacuation plan, and have emergency kits ready with food, water, medication, and important documents. And finally, inform others. While they're hoping the dam stays intact, they are erring on the side of caution, trying to lower the lake level without flooding the Severe River, but knowing this could be a long spring with feet of snow still sitting in the mountains. Now, I just got off the phone with city officials. They say that there has not been any additional movement or cracking in the last couple of hours, so that's some good news. But tonight they have crews there, they have engineers, they are looking at all scenarios, and they're brainstorming ways to fix what already has happened. Now, if that main dam does break, it wouldn't just be bad news for flooding now. It could be serious news for the summer when it comes to irrigation. Back to you.
That is a lot of water. So unnerving, I'd imagine, for a number of the residents. All right, we'll keep on top of it. Debbie, thank you.
All right, so there's the overview of what we were looking at, and that started, as you heard, on Monday. Tuesday, I was sitting in my office just minding my own business, doing my regular DEM PIO work, and I received a phone call from the Department of Natural Resources PIO. And I had worked with her a few times before on drought situations, on flooding, statewide flooding for the last 2 winters. And she notified me of possible dam failure that was happening in Panguitch. So basically, she started a joint information system right then. And she kind of brought me up to speed on the situation. But, you know, she said it was serious, but I really didn't think a lot more of it. Didn't seem to be involving us at that point. You know, as we all heard, if we're in emergency management, all emergencies start local and end local. So I really wasn't too concerned at that point. But later on, I learned later in the day that Garfield County, the county where that was occurring, was preparing a WIA message, wireless emergency alert message, to send out if they did need to issue an evacuation order instead of just a be prepared notice. And I am in my role at the state PIO, I was the state alerting authority as well, and on our state emergency communications committee. So I called up the emergency manager there on my way home and just said, "Hey, I hear you're working on a WIA message. Can I help you with it?" So I helped him craft that message, did some edits. So it followed the recommendations from FEMA of like the 6 or 8 elements that need to be in a successful WIA message and in that order and stuff like that. He also let me know that he was heading out of town. So I don't know how many of you heard of the BOOT principle, B-O-O-T, be out of town. That's kind of the best principle to apply if you ever are faced with an emergency. So he was leaving. But I helped him prepare that WIA message in case they needed to send it out. And then, as I said earlier, I didn't think about it again until I got the call. At 8:30 that night, my wife and I were teaching a square dancing class. We had been asked to teach a bunch of youth in our church some square dancing, where we're going to go on a pioneer trek with hand carts, and dancing was part of that. And my emergency management director said our DPS, Department of Public Safety Commissioner, has requested or ordered my deployment to support the Garfield County PIO needs. Be in Panguitch for 9 o'clock morning briefing the next day. Garfield County had a PIO, but it was, you know, they were very small community, small county. They wore many hats. And the public works director, I think, was also the PIO for the county. And he was obviously busy with all of the public works side of the incident. And you saw the deputy for the sheriff's office that did some interviews there. I don't know, I'm not sure, I guess that was on Tuesday. And he did a great job, but they needed him to support other needs as well. So just a side note, it's a 45-minute drive from my house to my office in Salt Lake, and then another 3-hour drive to Panguitch. So I was looking at a very early start the next morning. So basically, where do we start? Expect to drop everything else. I said to my director, I have some personal commitments. Can I be back the same day? A little naive question there. I had no idea how long to expect to be down there because we had another commitment to teach some more square dancing to another church group the next night. And he said, no, be prepared for several days. So I was planning for several days. My wife worked on rescheduling any of my previous commitments. So expect to drop everything and be there for the long haul. So here's just another quick video of the situation. This is a drone flyover. You can see the face of the dam there and the amount of water that's coming out of it. The outlet is off to the bottom left there, which just went past the screen. And at this point, they're not letting very much water out of the outlet. And I'll get into this a little bit in a minute too, but there was, as you heard in the news story, there's concern about having water left for their summer irrigation needs. So the dam's about 24 feet high. It's not very big, but you can see it's holding a lot of water behind it. It's much deeper than the face of the dam. And it's a big area. And you can see at this point, it's all still frozen over. And that's what was causing the situation was the ice, as water freezes, the ice expands and it was pushing against the top of that wall. We've had a couple of very wet years, and I don't think the reservoir had actually ever been this full in a long time. And that ice was just pushing against the top of that wall, which was 2 feet addition to the earlier dam built in the 1800s. And it was starting to lean and push that over. It created a crack in the seam, or a separation in the seam between the old dam and the addition. And here's another angle. You can see that it's starting to tilt forward to the left, and you can see the water running out of there. So another angle there, and it was just leaking, lots of water coming out. And they were initially thinking on Tuesday night, that day I was first notified, that this was always going to go. They thought this could go at any moment. The angle that wall was leaning on the top, they expected it to go over and all that water come out and then continue to erode the face of the dam and eventually just create a huge flood. So be prepared to deploy. Do you keep a suitcase packed? I don't. And I'm not recommending that either. Just kind of pack for the needs. What do you wear? You be prepared for the seasons. This was still, late winter, early spring. So I was prepared for cold weather. I was also prepared with all of my logoed shirts from DEM and DPS, logoed shirts, that type of thing. Didn't take any suits and ties and shirts like that because this is an outdoor situation. It's an emergency response. So you just, dress accordingly and pack what you need to for those situations. Then obviously have a PIO Go kit. And we're going to talk about that more in just a minute. I've sent a couple of handouts to David to disseminate to you with these lists that you're going to see here on the screen in just a minute. So you'll have these for yourselves. I'll talk about those more in just a second. Have and be familiar with all agency communications as well. I was deploying away from my office, but I took my radio, my sat phone. If you're issued those, you want to take those with you. Any mobile device, mobile apps, be familiar with those, have those loaded on your cell phone, obviously on a regular day-to-day basis as well. Be familiar with the operation of those things and the, procedures, etc. The channels, satellite phone numbers, I'll have all of that stuff at the ready all of the time, ready to go, to be prepared to deploy. So that PIO Go kit is, as David mentioned, I'm an associate with Argonne National Laboratory, and they've put together this list, and that's one of the handouts that you'll receive, but I just kind of retyped it here on the screen so you can see a variety of things that you can consider to put into a PIO Go kit, from electronics, portable power backups. I carry 3 of these, these power cells that you can use to recharge your phone. You got to keep these charged all the time. I carry these in my daily briefcase. So my PIO Go kit is almost like my daily bag. Instead, my briefcase with my laptop in it. I keep a lot of items in there, including these power packs, this solar powered charger. I've got emergency supplies like flashlights, first aid supplies in there, notebooks and pens and pencils, a mirror for checking myself before going on camera, making sure there's nothing on my face that I don't want to be there, things like that. That's all I keep in my daily bag that I keep in the car anywhere I'm driving. So a lot of that stuff, extra flash drives, SD card readers, and USB hubs. I've got all of those in my bag all the time, wherever I'm going. So, office supplies, and then your, personal items, your toiletries, change of clothing, makeup, compact with mirror. I mentioned that. I have a mirror in my bag, cash, PIO vest. I wanted to show you that one really quick. Fell on the floor here, but I carry this in my car all the time. I've got just a pullover vest, Velcro type of thing that says public information on the front and back. That's always in my car, anywhere I go. I have another one that says emergency management on it as well. And then some food and water. So here's our Utah, not near as detailed, but our Utah PIO JIC in a box list that we give out to our basic PIO classes. Office supplies, your accessories, the backpack, the PIO vest I mentioned, things like that. Your electronics, the digital equipment, cameras, USB drives, other stuff, first aid, MREs, food, snacks, sleeping bag. I did not take a sleeping bag with me. I'll explain that in a minute. And then just other items there. What are we missing? What's on your list? You have a list like this already? Maybe compare them and say, what are we missing? And I don't have that on my list. Maybe I need to add it to my list. You never know what you're going to be facing at the other end of the deployment. What's there, what's not there. Expect austere conditions, so just be prepared for those types of things. And there's lots of lists like this. But so travel accommodations, as I mentioned a minute ago, I didn't take a sleeping bag. My director told me that his admin assistant was going to make hotel reservations for me before I got there for the next couple of nights stays. But when we got there, did not end up checking into a hotel, found out there's not a lot of hotel options in Panguitch. There's a couple, but did not need them. The sheriff, once we met him, ended up offering his family summer home to us in Panguitch. So myself and another person stayed in his family summer house. So it was really nice conditions there as far as lodging. Now, my wife, she was very helpful. She packed a bag with food and snacks and drinks, water bottles, stuff that I could use on the road, going down and coming home, stuff I could munch on during the day while I was down there working. So I just had one of those big extra, or like those reusable grocery bags full of snacks and goodies and drinks and stuff like that. We did eat out on our dime when we were there. So have that cash, have credit cards, whatever you would need to kind of eat out on your own if you're not taking extra food, depending on what the situation is. They were restaurants. And I'd just like to mention, people were so grateful when they would see us out there in their community going to lunch or going to dinner. They'd come up and say, thank you for coming down and helping us. And it really was, getting a little emotional here, actually. I wasn't expecting to. It was nice to feel that appreciation and know that we were helping them and helping them be ready if they needed to actually evacuate and face that terrible flood situation. So it was really cool to be able to do that, just go out into the community and meet the people and talk to them like that. So day one, I packed my bags and tried to get some sleep. I only slept a few hours because, like I say, I had to get up really early to make that trip to be down there at 9 o'clock. So here's just another picture, just to throw in some more images. The face of the dam, you see that off to the right at the bottom, that dark spot in the snow that looks like a doorway, that's actually the outlet. And there's hardly any water coming out of that at this point in time. That's going to change later on because of the mitigation efforts the state engineer put into place. But you can see that person on top to give you some perspective on the dam itself. So we got there. Oh, did I miss a slide? No. Okay. Oh, I mentioned this here. I put this here because on the way down, as I was driving down that morning, I was contacted by the media. They didn't know I was going down there. They didn't know I was being deployed. I'm a regular contact with the media for emergency preparedness, emergency management. We've been working with them, as I said, for lots of our statewide flooding situations the last 2 winters. And we were currently running a Be Ready, and still are running a Be Ready Utah campaign on KSL radio, which is a great partner for us and the state in getting out emergency preparedness. And we were a good resource for them for any time some emergency was happening. So they had my numbers regularly and were calling me, and I was doing interviews all the time. So this morning, as I was driving down there, I received a call from KSL that morning asking about the incident. I told them I was being deployed and I'd get back to them later with an update. So, it's good to have media relations already established, who the anchors and reporters are that cover these types of stories, in larger, small markets, whatever the situation. Just have those good media relations in place to begin with. So then I got down there that next morning, arrived in Panguitch at 8:30. I made it a half an hour before the meeting started. I didn't expect to know anyone there in the incident, as David mentioned in the intro. But it turns out that our Division of Emergency Management, LNO, or liaison officer, was there over that region, as well as a few UHP troopers. And the UHP is part of our Department of Public Safety, which the Division of Emergency Management is in the same department. I didn't know those troopers, but we're kind of, I knew we're all on the same team there. At that point, I also learned that the UHP PIO was also deployed. I didn't know that at the time on my way down there. I thought I was going to be the only one there. So it was good news to know that there's going to be another PIO there helping in the situation. But I just kind of funny thing at that point, we're standing in the building where the meeting was going to take place, and a bit of a cockfight broke out between our DEM LNO and the UHP officers. They were talking to some local people from the sheriff's office and how they could support them. And the sheriff's office guy turned out to be the sheriff, turned out to be the incident commander. Nobody made any introductions yet at that point. He said, "What I really need is a PIO." So the UHP troopers jump in there. "Well, this is Lieutenant Roden. He's going to be a great PIO for you. He can handle things and have everything under control." And then my liaison officer jumps in there and says, "Well, this is Wade Mathews. He's our PIO. He's excellent. He's been in the business 20-something years," and so on and so on. So there's a little bit of a cockfight there. And I point that out because it's important to establish, who's the lead. And I'll get back to that in just a minute. But so we attended the daily briefing. I took tons of notes, and then I'll always follow up. If you're going to make a promise with the media, follow up. So I called back KSL Radio and gave them a report, and this is just a little snippet of that service.
Let's go to Wade Mathews, who's on standby for us with the Division of Emergency Management. He's in Panguitch. We talked this morning, Wade. You said you were heading into a meeting in the 9 o'clock hour. Is there anything you can share with us regarding that situation that you learned at that meeting regarding the lake and the dam?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, things maybe aren't looking as dire as they were yesterday, and this great team that are working together here in Panguitch have put together a plan to try to mitigate the risk somewhat, which includes just continuing to draw down the reservoir as they've been doing since this started. They want to start cutting away the ice. There's still ice on the dam, which is putting pressure on the dam itself, and start cutting away the ice and reducing that pressure, and then bringing in some more riprap and some rock and things that they can put against the dam and try to reinforce that and give them a platform to work on as well to continue to strengthen the dam. The people downstream are still under an evacuation notice to be prepared to evacuate should the need arise. And if that need does arise, a notice will go out over the wireless emergency alert on cell phones. And right now we are planning a town hall meeting this evening at 6 p.m. in the Panguitch High School gymnasium for all the public that are in the area to just get more information from community leaders.
Okay, so that was just the very first part of that. That interview went on for a little while, just giving an initial update after our first briefing there. So, first things first, identify who's who. Get the contact information of everybody that's all the players that are there. You know, names, titles, phone numbers, email addresses, their preferred method of communication. Identify who's the incident commander, you know, or the emergency manager. As I mentioned, the sheriff with the county was the incident commander. He had a deputy that was the emergency manager, but as I mentioned, he was out of town. Who are the public officials? This involved a city, this involved the county, this involved a state, other stakeholders were there, the assistant state engineer from the state, U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, they all had parts in this as this was in Forest Service area, and somehow BLM was involved as well. Identify the chain of command. Who do I report to? And I'm saying this because these were lessons learned. I didn't do this very well when we first got there, but eventually we did. What's the preferred method of communication, and what's the meeting schedule, and other expectations. Get all that as early as you can. Find all that information out, so you know what's expected, who you're talking to, and how you're doing it, and what your actions are. So, second thing second, understand the incident objectives. That's one of the first things you're going to want to find out too. What's the incident objectives, and then what are the communication priorities? You know, which will match those objectives most likely. Identify the review and approval process. And this is again something we didn't do early on, and I added these. I'll mention this right now. Throughout the whole event, well, maybe starting day 2, Lieutenant Rode and I, we started taking notes of after action stuff. What would have made this better? Next time, what do we want to do differently next time? So we started writing down after action items through the process as we were doing this. And this was one of them, was identify the review and approval process for what we were putting out. At very least, know it's releasable, know it's not releasable, stick to the releasable, you know, basic PIO stuff. Identify our action items. We just, as soon as we got out of that initial morning briefing, we did a couple of interviews right off the bat. We started writing down what are our action items we need to do today. Because you know, you got a blank slate. You're not doing your regular work. Identify what are our main actions, and then we divided those assignments amongst the team, which in this case was just myself and Lieutenant Roden. Then we got to work. Of course, this was a joint response effort with the county, the city, the irrigation board, and the state. And there were some differences of opinion, but we tried to stay out of the politics, stayed out of the politics as much as possible, and just did our job as PIOs. And we were representing everybody. We were the county PIO. The city did not have a PIO that I was aware of, never saw one. And the mayor was sending us requests, and we were helping the mayor with his requests as well. So we were there for everybody, but we were not involved in the politics and the infighting and stuff like that, which there was a little bit of. We participated in the morning meetings in the city office council room. There really was no city hall. This was their library that they had a conference room in, and that's where they conducted their meeting. That's where our briefings were at. But we were provided a small conference room, and the tourist office in the county building was just like a block away from the city library, city council room. We're just about a block away. So we established our location. We had a place to work, table, you know, that type of thing, and access to copy machines, access to any of those things that was available in the county building and the tourist office there. So right away, Lieutenant Roden started writing the situation update, kind of our first media report, and we established a place to post that on the UHP news site. And I put links in here, and I'm not sure if what happens. Okay, so there's DPS news, and we had a page open, Panguitch Lake Dam updated, and there's the date, and we just had pictures. We had updated little articles stamped with date and time, and this was just all available. And this was already a place that the media was used to going. The media were very available with DPS news, Department of Public Safety news. They were familiar with that and went there for news all the time. So it just seemed like a logical place. The county didn't really already have anything established, so we started using the DPS news portal. And you can see that little gauge right there. That gauge is measuring the tilt of that wall. That's just kind of that
Hey, Wade,
interesting picture there. Yeah.
we actually can't see that. All we
Oh, you
see
can't
is
see this
yeah,
part.
you're just sharing it. But I will make sure
Oh.
that I share direct links to these websites in the follow-up email. But all we're seeing is your presentation.
Okay, sorry about that. Then
No
let me go
problem.
back to my presentation. There we go. So I'd have to click on that window for you to see that. Sorry. Okay. So these are there in the slides if you want to go to that. We also use the Garfield County website homepage for all other public information. Again, it was already established locally and it was right on the top of the homepage. We put links to everything. We put the updates, maps. We put the flyer for the town hall meeting that was mentioned earlier. Everything else we put there on the Garfield County website. So we did not have to create anything on the fly. We used what was already available to us for disseminating this information out to the public and to the media. So, I said earlier, have those media relations, but at this point, you also need to make contact with them and let them know that, yes, we are the PIOs on this incident, representing the county, representing the city, representing whoever we need to represent. We're your go-to people. So make contact with the media through a media advisory, social media posts, identify yourself as the incident PIO. We started providing interviews. There's a clickable link there. I won't get on those either right now. Provide updates, monitor the media, do the regular PIO stuff. And on day one, we were trying to do these things ourselves. On day two, or it was day 3 of the incident, but our day 2 being down in deployment, we started calling for help. But here's just some samples of media coverage. Obviously, it was local. We had national media calling us all the time. We had international media covering it. We didn't actually talk to anyone internationally, but in our media monitoring, we noticed a lot of international coverage of the flood, of the potential dam failure and potential flood. So, media monitoring is important. And we shared all this with the local people as well, the coverage that was happening there of their incident. So we got to work at the mayor's request in that morning meeting, that first morning meeting. He requested that we have a town hall meeting, and it was a great idea. This worked so well to disseminate the public information to the public. What was the positive part about this was, though, that the efforts that were being done to mitigate the risk were working. So it was a positive. We're able to report positive news that mitigation efforts were working. We still didn't want to lift the evacuation notice. People still needed to be ready to evacuate if that signal ever went out, but it was a lot of good news. So this worked really well. So be prepared to fulfill any and all PIO functions, including planning and conducting a town hall meeting. So if you have not, I can't see anybody right now, but raise of hands or anybody, if you've conducted a town hall meeting before, it's just the same as running a news conference. If you've ran a news conference before, we did our site reconnaissance, identified a location. The high school gym was the only place big enough to hold a town hall meeting. So we arranged with the school district to do that. We notified the public and the media throughout the day. That flyer, maybe I'll go back a slide. This is a flyer that we put out. I wrote it just basically like a news release. Your opening paragraph with what was happening in the why, just a quick overview of the situation. Then the who, what, why, when, where, how. Basically, just a simple news release is what we did as a flyer for public notification. And then the city people went around and they posted these flyers all over town. They posted at all the doors, the banks, the schools, the grocery store, the restaurants. They posted those all over town. So, as I was saying, did our site reconnaissance, notified the public and media. We conducted a participant pre-brief meeting. So what was happening on that first day that we were there? There was another impromptu discussion, I guess, with some of the key players, including the sheriff and the state assistant engineer, the irrigation folks. They were all there in this meeting, and then we thought, well, we better go to that meeting in case there's any information we needed to get out of that meeting. So Lieutenant Rowe and the other PIO and I went to that meeting. When it concluded, I said, hey, everybody, while we're all here, let's conduct our pre-brief meeting before tonight's town hall meeting. So I just piggybacked off of that to have our pre-brief or pre-town hall meeting where we discussed who all was going to speak, who was going to have prepared statements, who was just there for answering questions, what order all this was going to take place, how much time we were going to allow. All of that was discussed in the pre-brief meeting, which ended at 5. So we had about an hour before the published time for the start of the town hall meeting. We just went straight, I said to everybody, hey, if you want to go home, grab some dinner, just be back like 15 minutes before it starts. But a lot of us just headed from that pre-brief meeting right over to the high school where we started setting up, make sure all the audio visual was working. We had a table with handouts of evacuation maps and emergency preparedness instructions and all that type of stuff on a table there for the people that showed up. I'm trying to remember who provided that because that wasn't us. It was actually, it may have been somebody from the school district or somebody that actually printed out all those handouts. So that was very helpful to have those handouts available. Something that we didn't do, but find out if there's anybody there that could help you with that. We confirmed that our participants were present. We identified additional unexpected VIPs that were there that I didn't know were coming, but we kind of announced their presence. I added them to the list as I was announcing who was there. Make sure that I recognized that they were there. We had other people from the state. The Department of Public Safety Commissioner came down for that. My boss's boss, so there were some unexpected people that showed up there. We just made sure they were all recognized and introduced. We provided a virtual option, and we were using, here's something to lesson learned, we were using the town's Zoom meeting account, which was a free account, which has a maximum of 100 people on there, I think. And it was working fine. It worked fine for their council meetings, which is what the only thing they ever use it for. There's plenty of bandwidth on it. But we got kicked off ourselves, or we left for some reason and tried to get back on. We couldn't get back on because there were too many people already in the Zoom meeting. So we couldn't even get back on to show the Zoom meeting. So we shut it down and opened it up again, and then we were in the meeting, and then I think that's how we fixed the situation. And then everybody got back in again, and it was full. That Zoom meeting was full. So make sure you've got a big enough Zoom account for if you're running a public meeting, for the virtual option of that public meeting. But overall, the town hall meeting went really well. I wasn't sure how many people to expect, but it filled up. The bleachers that I'm facing in that photo, they were full. All layers. There was a bottom layer on the gym floor and then a second layer up above. They were all full. The media came. They took video. They recorded it, which was great because we did not record it. We did not record the Zoom meeting, but one of the stations recorded the whole thing and they gave us access to that recording. They did not ask any questions. The media did not ask any questions. So it was just strictly pretty much a town hall meeting that the media covered. So that worked. The town hall works really well. We followed our schedule with our pre-planned presenters. Everybody did a great job. And then the people were available to answer questions. Lieutenant Roden was up in the audience with a microphone. He was fielding the questions and directing them. I was directing them to the right people. So it worked really well. That town hall was a huge success. So another step to remember in deployment, something again I did not do very well, was staying in touch with the home office or your EOC or your supervisor. Call them at some point, even if you're at lunch. That's what I ended up doing is we were at lunch and I found out that the state EOC was partially activated for the event and they were conducting their internal briefings. I was not aware of that. I was not checking my email regularly because I was just focused on the response. But I jumped onto one of those EOC briefings and gave them an update from my perspective down there. So participate in those briefings with your state EOC or your home office, or just stay in touch with your supervisor and keep them in the loop and up to date on what you're doing there. So Thursday, April 11th, day 3, I'm going to hit click because this little video, oh, it's got some sound on it. The situation was much more relaxed. They continued to focus on we focused on the communication objectives while the rest of the response team focused on the mitigation efforts. As we talked about cutting away the ice, this is a ditch witch that they just turned loose on the ice. They're just cutting slits in the ice, and it allowed that ice to have room to expand and pull away from the dam wall. So that's one of the mitigation efforts that was pretty cool. I just wanted to show you. But because of those efforts, the situation was much more relaxed on day 3 of the event, our second day there in deployment. But we continued to do what we were doing, went to our morning meetings and continued to identify our communications objectives. On this day, we resumed the Joint Information System. Remember, I mentioned that on Tuesday, I was called by the DNR PIO, kind of started a GIS. Well, it dropped, and then we didn't pick it up until the 3rd day. And that was something I wish we would have done earlier, especially looping in the PIO for the Division of Water Rights, which oversees dams. And then actually on a different slide up ahead, I'm going to mention we should have invited that person down. It would have been great to have that person there in person. The PIO for the Division of Water Rights, Department of Natural Resources, because the state engineer came from their office, and the state engineer was hugely instrumental in relieving the pressure from the dam and mitigating the whole risk for the situation. But no, who are the key agencies that are involved here in this incident? Make sure you are including those PIOs in your joint information system, whether it's in person or virtually. In our case, we had the Department of Natural Resource Division of Water Rights, American Red Cross, we pulled them in because of potential sheltering. U.S. Forest Service owned the land. UDOT, Department of Transportation, was providing cameras. I think they were bringing down cameras to set up on the face of the dam. They were manning this 24/7 with people there overnight, watching that dam face in case they needed to put down put up the red flag and issue the evacuation order. They had people there around the clock. Eventually, UDOT caught there with some portable power plants and lights and cameras, so we can just set up a camera on the dam. We did not publish that though, because we wanted to make sure that we had the bandwidth to monitor it ourselves, so the public did not get the live streaming, but we had it there for the emergency response. National Weather Service, I don't remember if they were in our GIS meetings, but they became a key player towards the end of our deployment. I'll talk about that in a minute. So just know who are all the agencies, all the players that that are participating, and make sure you're including them in the joint information system. So we did everything virtually besides Lieutenant Monroe and I that were on scene. We created a folder, a Google Drive folder, where we were posting all the updates, all the images, pictures, and videos that were being taken, graphics. We made maps there were maps made, we didn't make them, but the county or city made maps for evacuation routes and instructions for picking up your kids at the schools. All of that was available in this folder for all of the GIS partners. And we could, they were all available for media release. So all that was available there in a Google Drive. So we conducted our GIS coordination meetings on a daily basis after that, while we were there, which was for a short time, because I think on the next day after this, we were demobilized. So we asked the question, is a JIC needed? And yes, a JIC was needed, but the JIC was just the two of us, myself and Lieutenant Roden in person. Then we actually had some people in our JIC virtually. Okay, I got to hustle this up a little bit, that were helping with some media monitoring and doing some social media posts for us. So we had the JIC established as well. So I think I'm actually getting close to the end here. So perfect timing. We captured, as I mentioned, lessons learned throughout our deployment. And these were some more of those that I'm not sure if I mentioned or not. So invite a third person. We needed another person. It would have been helpful to have another person on scene. And we decided that should have been the DNR Water Rights. I explained that. Get the incident command officials' contact information. We did that, but it was kind of gradual. We should have done that immediately in that first meeting, but we just kind of like deer in the headlights a little bit. So that was something we should have done early on. Continue the joint information system sooner, especially with that DWR, water rights PIO. I called her a few times on that first day or second day, but we didn't have good phone coverage where we were at when we were actually up at the dam itself. We ended up taking some media tours up there. So establish that joint information system sooner, or continue, in this case, continue it. Establish that reporting chain of command. So Lieutenant Rode and I were sitting there now, who do we report to, and who are supposed to be reviewing our documents and reviewing what we're putting out there? That was not clear in the beginning. So establish that chain of command and that review and approval process immediately, early on. We didn't run into any problems, but because we didn't do it early, but just good lesson learned, do that immediately. And then request that SEOC support for updating WebEOC or making sure they're feeding me situation reports that they had. Okay. Okay, sorry, my phone was just ringing. Yeah, so then last slide. I think this is the last slide. April 12th was day 4 of the incident, day 3 of deployment. We were released to go home. They had alleviated the risk. They mitigated the risk so much that they actually lifted the evacuation notice. They had increased, I didn't mention this, but a little bit of that politics was the irrigation company did not want to release water out of the dam, to release the water pressure against the dam. They eventually did. So with the flow was like a maximum cubic water feet, CFW, cubic feet of water. Anyway, it was the maximum that we could put out of there. And they mitigated the risk enough that we could lift the evacuation notice. The sheriff was comfortable enough to let us go, but he says, if I need you, I'm gonna call you right back. And we said, yeah, please do. We just wanted to make sure everybody was good to go before we left. In fact, I was in my car getting ready to back out of the parking lot at the county building where our office was at, in the tourism office, and the sheriff pulled up. So I got back out of the car and he says, hey, we're still getting National Weather Service flash flood watches on a daily basis, and we don't want the public to keep getting those. What can we do to get that shut off? And I just happen to have a good friend at the National Weather Service office in Salt Lake. And I called him up. I had his number in my phone, called him up and said, hey, the sheriff would like you to turn off these flash flood watches. The Weather Service was doing those as long as the dam, there was an emergency dam plan, and it was at level 2. We were keeping it at level 2 though, just because through the rest of spring runoff, the plan was to keep it at level 2. When I notified the Weather Service, who was using that as their indication for a flash flood watch on a daily basis, they said, okay, we'll shut that off. So I got that shut off for the sheriff just before I left town. He had been trying every different way to get that turned off, but sometimes it's who you know, right? Who are your contacts and who do you know? And we were able to help him get that shut off. Keep track of your expenses and receipts, know who's going to be reimbursing you, and then be available if needed after the demobilization. As I mentioned, the sheriff, we did still participate in they turned into be weekly morning briefings every Monday morning. We tuned into those via Zoom, and we still conducted our joint information system meetings virtually for a few days past that initial deployment. Or maybe it was in the week 2 or 3. We may have kept the GIST meeting going as long as we were participating in the morning briefings virtually. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm out of time. There's my email address and phone number if you want to discuss this further. If you have questions, I know we didn't take any questions, but I think we have some time now, I believe. So David, I'll turn it back to you. Maybe you can have questions to start us off if you want, whatever. I'll turn it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Wade. That was fantastic. That was fantastic. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Wade directly, or you can put it in the chat and I will ask him. That was a great presentation, Wade. The accommodations You were roughing it. I like that. I've dealt with many people that have been deployed, and I do not remember anybody ever being offered a summer home to call their residents while they were there. So I want you to know how miserable you must have been. It just must have been traumatizing.
It was. I mean, the sheriff was so awesome and one of the first things he came up and asked us was, "Do you guys have a place to stay?" And at that point, we had not. You know, as I mentioned, my division director's admin assistant was supposed to find us a hotel, but at that point, she hadn't gotten back to us. So we gladly accepted his offer. We had private rooms. We had access to a kitchen, a laundry if we needed it. I mean, everything was there. And we tried to leave as little footprint as possible for them afterwards, cleanup wise. But and he actually came and stopped in one morning and talked to us a little bit about how the operation was going. So because he had offered us that location, he knew where we were at. He was comfortable in coming and sitting down and talking with us for a minute as well too. So yeah, that couldn't have been better.
Excellent, excellent. A couple of things you said. You mentioned contacts, get to know people. You know, I can't agree more. It's terrible to meet somebody the first time during a disaster. I recently got myself something new. I got myself a dot card. I do not work for dot card. I don't collect any money from them. But if you don't know what a dot card is, look it up. I just got one and I've used it a ton already. It basically gives you a little card with a little QR code, and any phone can scan it, and they have all of your contact information. As a PIO, I have found it just amazing so far. So highly recommend for that. You mentioned the go bags and the go kit. I did put those documents in the chat. If you didn't receive them, don't worry about it. I will email them out in the follow-up email as well. Let me see if we have any comments in the chat. Does anybody have anything they want to ask of Wade? John Bobel says, know what systems the state uses to coordinate actions, WebEOC, for example. And then if all ESFs update their sections, it saves a lot of phone calling, running around, getting updates. That's a great point.
Yeah, and as I was going to mention, I don't know how many of you are alert originators. So I was just wondering if that is part of your role as well. As I was talking about helping them craft that WIA message as PIOs, often that's part of our job in writing and doing that messaging. So I don't know if any of you had done that. And John put in the warn room, and then FEMA also has the MDD, the message development. I forget what the second D stands for right now. They also have the MDD if you're looking at, and you can use that for creating templates as well. You don't have to have an emergency to go into the MDD. The message development dashboard, message development dashboard, and you can plug in a scenario. It just asks you questions. What's the threat? What's that, where's that location? What's your protective action? How long is it going? And it'll create that WIA message for you. You can go in there day to day and just create templates for threats that you face there. So yeah, being able to do the WIA messages was a big, we didn't actually use it while we were there, but like I mentioned on that Tuesday before I deployed, I called up the emergency manager and helped him fix up his WIA message a little bit there. So yeah, those are a couple of resources, what John put in, and the MDD as well.
Excellent. I will make sure I put that link in the follow-up email as well. I know that FEMA just announced some training for that. Even if you're not an alert originator, it is a great tool just to simplify and get good quality informations that you can use in social media, you can use in talking points, you can use wherever. So I agree. John asks, any thoughts on organizing a PIO strike team at the state or the regional level? 10 PIOs or so who agree to deploy for large scale events. More is better. Seldom can one PIO do it all and not get burned out in 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And just, any thoughts is, yeah, if you can do it, do it. And we have a state PIO association here in Utah. It's been around, boy, ever since I've been a PIO. There was a little brief moment when it kind of fizzled, but during our 2002 Winter Olympic Games, here in Salt Lake, I think is when we established our PIO association, and it's been excellent. We've tried to not with a lot of success. I think we just need to put more effort into it, creating some strike teams and but we do utilize, I don't know that we've ever really done a huge response, but the PIO Association is a resource of, hey, calling out additional PIO help. So if you've got something like that, yeah, do strike teams or even just create an association of PIOs that you know that you could call to help you in an emergency.
Well, excellent point, and that is a great lead in for what is coming up. Kentucky Emergency Management is not necessarily working on strike teams, but what we are working on is the national qualification system and the Kentucky qualification system. And our next speaker is actually going to be Dr. Charlie Harris. And he's going to talk about the Kentucky qualification system next month, which is a certification program to get accredited as a deployable asset in an incident response. There are multiple positions. I think there's like 25 positions, but one of those positions will be a public information officer. So if you are interested in either getting accredited or actually deploying it sometime, it's a voluntary program. You don't have to. You may want to tune in next month for our webinar. So thank you for that. Any final thoughts from anyone? I do have a couple more announcements. I didn't mean to cut in and grab the screen on that, but you were leading right into a great segue for me, so I wanted to get it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments or questions for Wade? I see one in chat. Leonard asks, how will the PIO position evolve?
Yes, on the solar chargers. PIO position evolve. Is that referencing like a deployment or just kind of generally speaking? In a deployment, depending on long term, we were fortunate this kind of got mitigated and taken care of in about 3 days. But yeah, you could go weeks and weeks and weeks. And one thing that we didn't really talk about because we didn't need to do it was that handoff. And that's that kind of mean what by evolving, but handing off to who's your next PIO that's going to come in and make sure you're giving them those briefings, all the ICS forms, all of that type of stuff to give them a chance to start the job running.
That's an excellent point. Excellent point. I don't know if that's what he meant or what if this is what he meant, but as way of the PIO evolving, I think COVID has taught us a ton about just the virtual GIS system, the Joint Information System, and how you can utilize so many more resources that don't necessarily have to be there in person. I can think at least that is one way.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Wade. I appreciate this. This has been excellent. Thank you so much. I will share links and I will share a copy of the video, a link to the video. I'll share a copy of the presentation with everybody in a follow-up email that will probably be sometime next week. I've already mentioned our presentation for next month, October, on KQS. I went too far. In November, we will be doing one on data-driven decisions, how to get the most out of your social media analytics. I imagine a lot of people out there do a lot of social media, but like me, I always struggle with how do I know if I'm doing it right? How do I know if I'm doing something good? So I'm looking forward to this. Anybody that was part of our February Wednesday webinar should recognize Bronley Mishler. She was the presenter back in February, so she'll be back with us for this. And then December, we're taking off. We're not going to have a webinar in December. And then we do have another PIO public information basics class being offered in Floyd County. There are seats available. I believe there are 14 people registered now. So we've got room for 10 or 12 more easy. I've sent out information on that. And one more I did not include. I do know that I emailed everybody. We are going to do a workshop next month in Madison County. It's a combination of RC 202 and 207, which are crisis communication trainings. That'll be over 3 days. I'll send out some more information on that. So otherwise, again, I want to thank you, Wade. That was a great presentation. I appreciate all the resources you shared with us, all the insight. That was great. Thank you so much. Everybody else, thank you for showing up, for being here today, and have a great rest of your Wednesday afternoon.